All right, we'll make it work. All right, so we are studying Proverbs. We have a number of folks visiting with us. And the good thing is when you're studying in Proverbs, it's not like, you're in the middle of a context or paragraph or whatever, so it works out well. We got a lot of parents and grandparents grinning from ear to ear, so that must mean that youngins and grandyoungins are in town. So, but that's good. We always appreciate having visitors and even some folks that are not really what we consider visitors, just back home for a day or a few days. So it's always good to have them as well. If you are visiting, just letting you know, I was telling somebody just a moment ago, I've got these 2026 calendars or magnetic calendars about the size of a postcard. You can stick that to your fridge. I send that to our visitors. If I have an address from a visitor card or whatever, I'll send that to our visitors somewhere around the end of the year. But the end of the year is upon us. So if you're visiting and you're interested in one of those, just let me know. I'll be happy to share one with you. And for our members, I've got I think I counted 25, 26, something like that left. So once I give those to visitors, those will be fair game for the Bremen folk. All right, we've been studying Proverbs, and we've broken this down into sections. We're studying it topically instead of a verse by verse study, which we haven't done since I've been here. I think, isn't that how Sydney taught it last time? When it wasn't terribly long before Sydney left. I know it's been a few years, hadn't it? But I think Sydney maybe had gone through a verse-by-verse study, and I've done it that way before, and I decided this time to do it topically. It was, in some ways, more of a challenge, but I do like the way that we've just working our way through these topics. We talked about the major section of self and God and wisdom as applied to self, how I can try to avoid being a fool, try to have wisdom to live the best life, and a lot of commentaries, a lot of studies that you read on the book of Proverbs. That's kind of how they approach the theme of the book, is how to live the best life. And not just here, but in the hereafter, obviously. But a lot of times we think about living the best life with heaven in view, and that is always in our view, and it should be. But the point of Proverbs is this is how to have the best life here in this life as well. So there's so much wisdom there. And as one study I found, it was just a little electronic booklet that was published by one brother. He calls his study "Don't Be Dumb." And that's a pretty good summation of the book of Proverbs. It's like Solomon is saying, don't be dumb. I saw another brother, we've been studying Ecclesiastes on Sunday mornings, also written by Solomon, through the Holy Spirit, of course. But he called his study, it was a different brother, but he called his study of Ecclesiastes, Don't Waste Your Life. I like that title for that book. But we're looking at this topically. And we did our first major section on self and God. This second major section is all centering around speech. So we've looked at speech in a general way. We've looked at numerous verses in Proverbs that talk about using speech sparingly, like not being so quick to speak, not being of so many words that we fail to listen and slow down and consider all the facts and all that. We looked last Wednesday at encouraging speech, peacemaking speech, and then tonight we're picking up with speech that is deceitful. And as you might imagine, Proverbs also has a lot to say about deceitful speech. And so we'll work our way through, as we have done in the past, just as many of these as we can. Now, my dad knows where I'm going to be at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. It's Central Time there. He's not skipping. So Proverbs chapter 6 is where we'll begin. I don't know why I went to chapter 12 when I pulled this up a while ago. I always say one of these days when my mom or my dad calls me and I'm in a class or class setting like this, I always say one of these days I'm just going to pick it up and answer it. And when they say, "What are you doing?" I say, "Well, I was teaching my class." Proverbs chapter 6. Specifically, we're going to look at 12 through 19. And you see this heading there that the New King James has, the wicked man. And we're more familiar with 16 through 19, but really this section, we could say 12 through 19, dealing with this wicked person. And it's not dealing solely with deceit and deceitful speech, but there is a lot to do with that in this section. And so you see New King James on the left, ESV on the right. I'll read from the King James, so you have at least 3 different versions you can compare here. King James says, "A naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a froward mouth. He winketh with his eyes, he speaketh with his feet, he teacheth with his fingers. Frowardness is in his heart. He deviseth mischief continually. He soweth discord. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren." All right, so backing up there to verse 12. And again, I'm not going to comment on everything in all these verses because we're looking at this specifically right now for the sake of considering speech in the form of deceitful speech. But God, it goes without saying, or at least it should, God hates lying. God hates all types of deceit. Alden, in his commentary, says on page 57, "Wise people don't lie because in the end it doesn't pay." Well, we might even go a step further and say wise people don't lie simply because it's just not right. It certainly isn't practicing the golden rule, but we might also add that, yes, in the end it does not pay. But the idea of verse 13, he winks with his eyes, he shuffles his feet, he points with his fingers. The idea there is deception by means of body language. This might be unspoken, but it is deception nonetheless. It might be that you know something and maybe you found out in a way that you shouldn't have, or for whatever reason, and somebody tells me something, I might go, well, I might say, I didn't lie. If I'm trying to make somebody believe I didn't know that's a form of deception. It might be looking shocked. I put an example. Where did I put that? Well, let me mention this, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. But the idea here, it could be affirming, it could be denying without words. And, I was kind of, if I can just tell on myself a little bit, I was sort of notorious for this as a child, especially as I got to teenage years, and maybe I'd done something I shouldn't have, or maybe I broke something. Mom wasn't home, Dad wasn't home, and they come in, and it's just, there it is, it's broken. And Mom says, "Why, my vase is broken," or whatever it is. And I go, really? Well, I might say, I didn't lie about it. But did I? Or sometimes, parents might ask about something and you just go, not even saying a word. But it's conveying something that is deceptive. Sometimes people might shake their head or nod their head. There's all kind of different ways. The winking with the eye, sometimes people will do that. They'll kind of wink at somebody like, while they're saying something over here, and they're winking at somebody over here. All kind of different ways, nonverbal deceptive type behavior. Alden says, same page 57, gestures, tone of voice, and even facial expressions are calculated methods of deception. Behind a facade of sincerity lurks a perverted mind and spirit of discord. Well, it's not always the case, obviously, but here you're talking about with this deceitful type person. And the example I said I'd come back to is that I had written in my notes is it might be something like, and here's where it really gets into it, it's just deceitful. But it might be that here's somebody, let's say I've been gossiping about someone, slandering someone behind their back. And one day, that person who's heard about this, they come and they say, Chad, I'm sad, I'm discouraged, I'm frustrated. I found out that somebody has been going around and spreading things about me that are not true. They've slandered me, they've gossiped about me. And I look at them and I go, oh, no way. Well, through just that nonverbal language, I'm conveying that I'm shocked. Well, am I shocked? If I've been doing the gossiping, if I've been doing the slandering, I'm not shocked. I'm the culprit. I might feign shock. I might feign I can't believe that. And I might walk away and tell myself, well, I didn't lie. I just said, whoa, really? I can't believe that. But it's deceptive. Again, Alden notes in his commentary, 15 of 18 Bible uses of the words discord or dissension, 15 of 18 are in the book of Proverbs. Never noticed that before until reading that. But make no mistake, God will not tolerate the sowing of discord. He doesn't tolerate lying, and he certainly doesn't tolerate the sowing of discord, which is also mentioned here. When you see, where is it, verse 15. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy. You see the same thing in the New King James there, verse 15. The ESV renders that first word in the second phrase as in a moment. But you see it in the New King James, this repetition. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. But the use of suddenly twice, and especially back to back like that, seems to be an emphasis on the unexpected nature, the sudden nature of the deceptive person, the liar's comeuppance, as we would say. This is a person that they think they got everybody fooled, and they may have a lot of people fooled. They may have most of the people fooled. But there's coming a comeuppance. They're going to be found out, and we'll see that later on in some of these other verses. And many times it happens very, very suddenly. Notice here some similarity, and just, you can see this on the screen. Verses 17 through 19 compared with 12 through 16. Again, I don't think I put this together. Alden mentions this in his little brief commentary on the book of Proverbs, but he talks about the similarity of language. Notice you have in verse 12, here's a person that he winks with his eyes. When you get down to verse 17, one of the things God hates is a proud look. You see the eyes, the look. Then, when you get back up here to verse 12, you have a person with a perverse mouth. Oh, verse 17, one of the things God hates is a lying tongue. When you get back up there in verse, it's 13, last phrase there, he points with his fingers. Again, deception with his fingers. Again, it might be somebody asks a question and I'm being deceitful, and the answer, I know good and well the answer is no, but I might just kind of give a thumbs up. Well, that could be deceit, just using gestures. Again, nonverbal. But he points with his fingers. When you go down to verse 17, hands. that shed innocent blood are one of the things God hates. And you see that relation between these two different passages that are right here back to back. 14, verse 14, perversity is in his heart. Well, what does verse 18 say? One of the things God hates is a heart that devises wicked plans. Back up there to, I think this one's in 13. Yeah, he shuffles with his feet. You go down to verse 18. One of the things God hates, feet that are swift and running to evil. Then you see, back up here, you've got the, I'm looking at the New King James. I think I was looking at it in the King James. Let me see. Frowardness is in his heart, verse 14. I think that's what I was, yeah. Frowardness is in his heart. It also says, verse 14, frowardness is in his heart, he deviseth mischief continually. And so when you go down to verse 19, you've got a false witness who speaketh lies, or who speaks lies, that idea again of being froward, dishonest. And then you've got verse 14 there, last phrase, he sows discord. And the seventh thing God hates is one who sows discord among brethren. So it's interesting to see the relationship between those verses. All right, anything else on that one before we move on to our next passage? Just because I'm standing up here, I mean, y'all can't talk. Don't go silent on me. All right, so let's go to chapter 12. Yes, Billy made a good point that if you think about it, all of these different aspects, these 6 things, yea, 7 that the Lord hates, all these different things right here in 12 through 19 of chapter 6, all were involved to some extent in the crucifixion of Jesus. Very, very true, very good point. All right, chapter 12. Let's see, verse 17. He who speaks truth declares righteousness, but a false witness deceit. King James has it as he that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness deceit. It's interesting, this first part, it equates telling the truth with facilitating justice. And that's righteousness, it's right doing. Justice, doing what is just, what is right. And even when you look at it in the ESV, the way they've got it, whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence. It's facilitating justice. And you see the Hebrew, the footnote there, Hebrew breathes out. Breathing out the truth. They speak is true. You know, we sometimes say of somebody, and we sometimes say it jokingly, but also with a bit of seriousness. Maybe we'll say, you know how to tell that person's lying? If his mouth's open, if he's speaking. But you know, isn't it true that there are folks that you could say just the opposite? Do you know how to tell that person is telling the truth? Well, if they're speaking, they're telling the truth. Because you know they're honest and people of integrity. But the first part here equates telling the truth with facilitating justice. And that second part, that second phrase, equates lying with promoting injustice, a false witness. And that's that idea of, especially in a judicial setting. Again, to quote from Alden, page 102, each of us contributes to law and order when we tell the truth and reduce it when we don't. That's an interesting thought. We're contributing to law and order, justice, when we tell the truth. And in some small way, at least, we're taken away from such when we're dishonest. That's a very true statement. And this applies across life. It's not just in a courtroom. And I might add also, it applies not just to speech. We could talk about honesty in our taxes and accounting matters. We could talk about honesty when I'm at home and private, when I'm at work, and when I'm around Christian folk. It's throughout my life. public, private, wherever. So he who speaks truth declares righteousness, but a false witness deceit. Now, just drop down a very, one verse down, 2 verses down. Verse 19 and 20. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Verse 20 says, deceit is in the heart of them that imagine evil, but to the counselors of peace is joy. Well, our limited perspective, it often makes it very difficult for us to believe verse 19. We read it, and we know the Bible's been vindicated time and time again as the inspired, inerrant Word of God, and yet, with our limited perspective, is that not often very difficult to really let that sink in and buy in, so to speak? I think it is. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue, it's but for a moment. But the idea of verse 20 seems to be that the evil man's goal, or the goal of evil men, is deceit. Deceit is in the heart of whom? Verse 20. It's in the heart of those who devise evil. Do you know who tells lies? Liars. The person that has wicked thoughts, deceitful thoughts, it comes out. And this kind of goes to what Jesus says in Matthew 12 about out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. And, of course, he says true joy comes only to the honest person, the just person, the peacemaker. But my point here being that the contrast is not just between evil and good. It's also their aims, their goals in life. In other words, deceit is in the heart of a person whose aim, whose goal is evil. But a person who is a counselor of peace, his aim is joy, true joy that can be found only in living a life that is in accordance with the will of God. So it's not just contrasting good and evil. Certainly it is, but it's not just that. It's their goal. What is my aim? What is my goal? And that's kind of the idea. All right, drop down just a few verses to verse 22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight, is the way the King James says it. Again, this just drives home the point. God hates lying. It is an abomination to him. In our first section where we talked about self and God, and we had a whole subsection on the word abomination because it's used numerous times in the book of Proverbs. That is a strong word. We say something is abominable or it is an abomination. It is something that really is, man, you just really don't like that. Well, so it is with God. Lying is an abomination. So if I'm going to please God, I got to speak truthfully. All right, anything else from chapter 12 before we move into the next? All right, next chapter, 13. 13:5. A righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. Again, you have some strong language here. A righteous person does not merely avoid lies. He hates lying. And that's we sometimes say, when I was growing up, sometimes as a kid, one of us would say something. Maybe mom says, here's what's for supper, and you go, I hate that. And sometimes parents, and especially one of my aunts and grandparents, sometimes would say, now, hate is a strong word. And a lot of times they were getting us to try to, be careful how you just throw around some words that are really strong words. And hate is a strong word, but there it is. A righteous man hates lying. So that's strong language to say a righteous person is not going to just avoid lies, but he hates lying. and he finds that in his own life, if something should happen and he stumbles, he's going to hate that in his own life as well, just as much. And he's going to rid his life of that and repent and make it right and do better going forward. And so there's a contrast here. The wicked are not just bothersome. Here you have the righteous, they hate falsehood, but the wicked bring shame and disgrace. I really like the, let's see how the New King James has that word as well. I like the New King James and the King James wording there where it says, a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. So he's not just bothersome. Here's a person that is odious. They bring shame, they bring disgrace. And that word loathsome, as it's rendered in the King James and New King James, is the same word that's used 3 different times in the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 7, and also 7:18, 7:21, and 8:18. It's used in the context of those frogs, the plague of frogs. Because you know how the Bible describes that plague on the Egyptians? It was loathsome. And I think that's probably a pretty accurate way of putting it for anybody. You have that kind of a plague of frogs. It's also the same word that is used in Exodus 16, verse 20. There it's in the context of manna. Now, why would the Hebrew word that here is rendered loathsome be used in the context of manna? Anybody remember this? Well, that's a little bit later in 21. They do say, and I think that's a cognate there in Numbers 21, where they say, our soul loatheth this light bread. But in Numbers 16, they were told, you gather how much? Just for today. Which, of course, reminds us of Jesus when he taught the disciples to pray. He taught them to pray, give us this day our daily bread. So there's something to be said for trusting God day by day. Some versions, I think, have that. Give us day by day our daily bread. He said, just gather enough for one day, today. Except, there was one exception to that. What was that? On Friday. You gather enough for 2 days, because it'll last you Friday and Saturday, the Sabbath. Because they weren't together on the Sabbath. But we're tempted to say, those stubborn Israelites, right? Well, let's be honest. Those stubborn people, because we can be stubborn sometimes, right? What did they do? They go out and they gather. I mean, man, look at this stuff. It tastes great. You can bake with it. You can do all kind of stuff with it. I'm getting some extra. But what happened the next morning? It bred worms, and the word used in the King James, at least, is not loathsome there. What is it? It stank. It stunk. And it bred worms. Now, hold your thought there. I want to come back to Proverbs. I want to go to Ecclesiastes. It's amazing how much overlap there is sometimes. And I don't know about overlap, but similar passages. What does Ecclesiastes 10:1 say? Sometimes they used to use this all the time on the college football broadcasts when they talk about the fly in the ointment. You know, was it the CBS announcers there was a guy on CBS, he always, I can't even think of that guy's name now, but he always would talk about the fly in the ointment. You know, if some really high-ranked team lost, and they're trying to figure out of course this before playoffs, trying to figure out the bowl picture and who's going to compete for the national championship. They say, everything was so clear until this team went and lost. That's the fly in the ointment. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment, is the way the New King James puts it, and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Of course, you see a footnote there. Targum and the Vulgate admit that. And then the ESV has dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench. We understand the idea there. It stinks. And so wicked folks, and especially again, in our context, deceitful folks, their effect on family, their effect on their community, it is contagious. They make everybody look bad. We might say they make everybody smell bad in that figurative sense. Sometimes people will say, what's it to you if I want to do my own thing? I went to UA with a guy that, he was a member of the church, but if I had a nickel for every time he said to me, or I heard him say to me or to others, you can't legislate morality. I said, man, are you out of your mind? You can't legislate morality? So we should just do away with laws against murder because that's a moral crime. You can legislate morality, and you should. And the law of Moses, of course, was full of legislating morality. But the point here I'm getting at is that even with something like deceit, it affects beyond just that individual. Sometimes people will talk about a victimless crime. That's ridiculous. There's no such thing. It affects others. And so just like that idea of the dead flies putrefying the perfumer's ointment, well, when we sin, again, in this context, being deceit, it affects others, not just us. All right, nothing else on that. We're going to move into chapter 14. 14, verse 5. Anything else on that, by the way? All right, 14, verse 5. A faithful witness will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. Well, again, you have this idea. It's a faithful witness. He's going to tell the truth. You know it. And Alden says that a more accurate rendering would be something like a faithful witness, or he has it, a reliable witness, never lies. And the point here being, the contrast being, with a false witness, you never know. We've all known somebody. It may be even, hopefully not currently, but it might be that even at some point in your past, you were that person. That people, when you told them something, they didn't just automatically believe it because they didn't know if they could trust you or not. But we've all known that person, somebody that you can't just take what they say at face value, because you don't ever know, are they telling the truth or not? Because they're not always honest. I just went blank. What's the story? There's like a little story. The boy who cried wolf. I just completely went blank. The boy who cried wolf. He lied about it so many times that it got to the point where then a wolf really came and he was telling the truth, but nobody believed. Why? Because he was a liar. And so that's the idea here is with a false witness, with a person who's deceitful, you just don't ever know. He might be telling the truth, but he might not. But the faithful witness, again, we've all known that person, that somebody might say of them, I'm going to tell you something. If he said it, if she said it, I know it's true. At least in so much as they know it's true. Because that person, they're not going to utter something false. But with the false witness, you just don't ever know. Lies will often mix truth with falsehood, by the way. A liar, in telling a story, telling their lies, they often mix truth with falsehood. But a faithful witness speaks, as we say, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that's the idea here. Next, 14:25. The verse says, a true witness delivereth souls, but a deceitful witness, I'll get it out in a minute. A true witness delivereth souls, but a deceitful witness speaketh lies. This is very similar to the one we just looked at, verse 5, and it gives a little bit more by saying here that the truth that is told by a true witness may literally save lives. And just to drive that point home in this Bible context, especially this Old Testament context, we talked a little bit Sunday morning about Jezebel. 1 Kings, 21? Yep. And Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard, Naboth wouldn't sell it to him, and he's pouting, and Jezebel says, I'll get you the vineyard, but what was her solution? She got false witnesses. And you couldn't put a person to death except what? Under the law of Moses, except under the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. So she finds multiple false witnesses, people that were dishonest enough that, hey, you slip me some money, I'll say whatever you want me to say. And they go and they say, Nabal, blaspheme God. And oh, the irony of Jezebel setting that up. One of the most idolatrous creatures in the history of mankind. But she did, and he was put to death. Well, a truthful witness literally would have saved a life there. Yes, sir.
That's a reminder that the reliability, it's not only the quantity of witnesses, but the quality
Yeah.
of witnesses. Because if you take false witness and add false witness, it's still false.
And that was, again, you saw that with the crucifixion of Jesus, or the mock trial of Jesus. Multiple false witnesses. And of course, ironically, they can't even get their witnesses to agree together. But yeah, quality of witnesses as important as quantity. So I think there's a symbolic point here, and that is that spiritually speaking the truth of the gospel, the truth of the Bible, is it true to say that a true witness who's speaking the truth of God's word saves lives? Might very well be that by talking to someone about the Lord, about the scriptures, about the church, might can save an eternal spiritual life in the form of a soul. It might even be that someone is a brother or a sister in the Lord, and we speak the truth to them, and it might be something that they are not crazy about hearing in that moment. They're not too thrilled about it. But again, could it potentially save a life? I had a brother tell me several years ago that he was in I don't remember the details of the situation, but he was very close to getting himself into a serious situation with moral sin. He had a preacher friend, they were both preachers, who as an outsider could see that this was going a bad direction. And I think it was in the form of a letter he wrote him and said, I'm telling you this because I care about you. You've already gone too far with this, but you're about to get on a really slippery slope, brother. And it made that guy so angry. And how dare you make such a false assumption and judgment? I mean, it was just, he was angry. And it took him a few days. He went back, they made peace, and I think it was a few years down the road that they were talking about this later. And he said, I've never actually told you, brother, but everything you said was spot on. And he said, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, I credit you with saving me from God only knows what in my life, maybe to the point of going so far that I became so callous that I never would have come back. And he said, it's because you said that to me, and you called me out. So, speaking the truth, it could save lives physically. It certainly can and does save lives spiritually. Proverbs 17. Let's grab these real quick. 17:4. A wicked doer giveth heed to false lips, and a liar giveth ear to a naughty tongue. You see the New King James, evildoer gives heed to false lips, a liar listens eagerly to a spiteful tongue. Reminds us of several modern proverbs. Like begets like hangs around like. Sometimes we say takes one to know one. Birds of a feather flock together. People tend to be most comfortable around people who are like them. Which, of course, begs the question for each of us to ask ourselves, who am I most comfortable around? Am I more comfortable in a setting where there are Christians, there are people who are trying to do what's right and live a life that is in accordance with the will of God? Or do I find myself more comfortable and at ease among people who are worldly, wicked people? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves when we look into the mirror of God's Word and answer it honestly. Proverbs 17, verse 7. Excellent speech becometh not a fool, much less do lying lips a prince. In other words, honest, honorable speech is not to be expected from a fool. Period. Nor are lying lips to be expected in a prince, or we would say in leadership. Honesty. God expects honesty. He hates lying and dishonesty. All right, we'll pick up with Proverbs 19, chapter 5, God willing, next week. Thank y'all so much. Again, we appreciate those who are visiting with us or those who are just back home for a day or two.